Okay, so we're going to talk about 1Q84. Books like this is why I don't make a TBR. Like, I have one and it's extremely fluid. I don't even bother making TBR videos. I could make one, but I never stick to it because it's super, I have a rough idea of what I want to read. I have about half of the books on this bookshelf that I have not read yet because I keep just seeing things. I'm like, ooh, I really want to read that. Buy it and I put it on the shelf. I'm always like, oh, I'm gonna get to that one. Like a Snow Crash down here was supposed to be, it was on my TBR for 2021. I haven't read it yet because it keeps getting pushed back by stuff like this. And I bought 2 Haruki Murakami books, 1Q84 and Kafka on the Shore. And I started reading this one and I immediately, this is a 1,000-page tome, and I tore through it in like a week. Not kidding. Now, granted, I had a little bit of help from Audible, but that's not the point. I still tore through a 1,000-page book in a week because it was that good. And immediately, that Kafka on the Shore book back there, I already started it. It was the next book I opened. I kind of knocked out Clara and the Sun in there too. But anyway, boy, we'll talk about that one next. Anyway, so this book is amazing, and it's not, and I'd say just go read it like I do with a lot of stuff. Like, go read this book, oh my God. Although it's not for everyone. I'm going to say that right up top. As good as this book is just absolutely a next level amazing as this book is probably not for everyone. I knew in chapter 1 that I was going to absolutely love this book. This woman is in a taxi and she's late for an appointment. And the entire chapter takes place in the cab with a conversation between her and the cab driver. That's it. And it's just talking and listening to the radio and talking, and but it gets you extremely invested in ridiculous nothing. It gets you invested in nothing. And then when she exits the car, in order to make it to her appointment on time, she's going to get out of the car. She's going to climb down this emergency fire escape thing off the side of this bridge overpass that she's stuck on. The chapter ends with her walking towards the fire escape. Now, the way the book presents this is like her walking towards a set of stairs is like the most dramatic thing that could possibly be happening at that second in time. And you're like, and it's the contrast between she's walking towards a flight of stairs and the dramatic way in which this is presented to you. I was like, oh, okay. Like, this is my speed. I could just feel it. I could see it. And so far I was so excited by a conversation and somebody walking towards stairs. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a good 1,000 pages if it can keep this feeling up. Oh boy, does it. Then chapter 2 is Tango, and it's about these guys, Tango and his publisher, or a publisher, who read this little book by a teenage girl who's submitting it for a contest, and they read it and they think the story is the greatest thing they've ever read. The writing is bad, but the story's, what did I just say? Anyway, the writing's bad, but the story's phenomenal. So they've come up with this scheme to rewrite. By the way, this is spoiler free. This is literally the first 2 chapters of the book. You'll be fine. It's a 1,000-page book, but they come up with the scheme. Tango will rewrite the book. And they'll submit it under her name. She already is submitting it under her name, so it's not like they're doing that much, but just pretend he didn't kind of do a little bit of a fix-up job on it. And is this morally wrong? Sure. But they talk about this like they are committing the grandest conspiracy that has ever been conceived by mankind. They discuss it like they're planning an assassination of the president of the United States of America or something. It is, it's discussed in such grandiose terms, and the stakes are so astronomical. I don't know. It's just so over the top. And you're like, yeah, okay. Is it immoral? Yeah. Could you get in trouble if you did it? Yeah. The guy might even lose his job. But anyway, so now I'm invested in this, and I'm just like, this is just what is happening, and it's so good. Now, don't let me give you the wrong impression. This is not a fast-paced book. It moves. This is why I say it's probably not for everybody, but it's not a fast-paced book. It's actually quite slow. It's extremely slow-paced, and very little happens. And we're talking about 1,000 pages a book here, and very, very little happens. That right there is going to turn a lot of people off. Slow pacing, not much happening, a lot of pages to get through. But the way that it's written is absolutely mesmerizing. It's completely surreal. It is absurd. And it's written with a flair and a flavor that is just unmatched. If you're into a little bit of absurdist and surrealist, I know I said that, absurdist and surrealist fiction. If that kind of thing turns you off, this might not be the 1,000 pages you're ready for. Technically, it's 3 books. It was originally printed in Japan in 3 different books for release over here. I think it might have been released as 3, but the one I have is just a big old 1,000-page book. I've seen some of them, like the little paperbacks, like 1,200 pages. Anyway, now it also implies, both through the title and directly in the text of the book, it implies that it's kind of got some vague connection to George Orwell's 1984, with it being 1Q84, which is actually in Japan as a play on words, which that would actually be pronounced in Japan as 1984. And they make some references straight up in the text to George Orwell and the book 1984, and this book being 1984, and this book taking place in the year 1984. And I don't really know why. Whatever. I didn't find any real meaningful parallel between this and the book 1984, other than the title and the fact that it's referenced directly in the text. Other than that, I feel like this book had a lot more in common with a Philip K. Dick book than anything 1984 George Orwell. It was literally almost like reading a Japanese version of a Philip K. Dick book, or a Philip K. Dick book with a Japanese flair. I can't talk. So speaking of Philip K. Dick, let's talk about some characters in here, because I think that's where that parallel really comes into stark focus. Like, seriously, at least for me. Because when you write a character, you can ground the character, you can make them extreme, you can make them absurd, you can make them just a little bit off kilter, right? Kind of ground them, but then just put them a little bit off kilter. And that's a popular thing to do, but there's a lot of ways to do that. You can have, which way do they lean when you tip them off a little bit? Are they going to lean into the weird or the creepy, or the, how do you want them to just feel, because I'd say creepy is a kind of popular. If they're going to make them off, they make them off and just it kind of makes you uneasy and unsettled, and it just kind of gives you that, makes your skin crawl creepy feeling. This book does the exact same thing. The characters are extremely grounded, but they're just a little bit off kilter, but they lean their off kilter in the direction of the ridiculous. And in an amusing and entertaining way. So they're all off kilter, they're all leaning just a little bit into the ridiculous, but it's the exact same kind of ridiculous that Philip K. Dick would use. You'll get a little bit of their thoughts, and you'll get a little bit of what they say, and it's just off. It's, people don't think like that. People don't talk like that. But it's not upsetting, and it doesn't creep you out. It's just a little bit ridiculous in the way that people are behaving. Other than that, I really, it's so intangible, and it's so hard to put my finger on. That's about as good as I'm going to be able to do it for you, honestly, as to why the characters feel like Philip K. Dick characters. And then the characters is just phenomenal. Actually, the weakest, I would say, of all the characters was Aomame. And I thought that I was really going to like her, especially from chapter 1. And then chapter 3, or whenever you find out that she's an assassin. Once again, not really spoilers, guys. I was like, this is going to be good. Not so much. I mean, she was fine. She was fine. Don't get me wrong. I loved this book. But she was actually the weakest of all the characters. It was Tango. Holy crap. Everybody on his side. He was great. But Komatsu was just my favorite character in the whole book. Absolutely just blew every other character out of the water. He disappears for a brief chunk of the book just because, it's not his book. He's just a character in somebody else's chapters. So he kind of goes away for a little bit. Oh God, he left a hole in the whole book for me when he wasn't there. It was just, poor Komatsu, because he's the most ridiculous of the characters. His behavior was easily the most ridiculous out of all of them. And I'm including Fukaere, who is, wow, that woman she's a girl that is in Tango's story. And she was wonderful as well, reading her. She kind of, if you've ever watched an anime, and that anime had like the dead-eyed girl, like say a cast of characters in an anime, and you'd have the female, like young teenage female character who was kind of dead-eyed and talked in a real monotone voice and didn't really say much or emote much, and she just kind of, that character, that was Fukaere. And every time she spoke, I could see and hear exactly what that character looked and sounded like, because I have seen it done so many times before in a different medium. But the second she spoke, I was like, I know that character. And it was wonderful. And it just added that was part of the Japanese flavor to the book for me. She wasn't so much like a Philip K. Dick character. Just the best characters. That's what drug me through the book, though, was the character work, and it was just so entertaining. Now, I feel obligated to bring up, because I just threw such a big old fit in a rant about Endymion, and one of my biggest complaints about Endymion was the weird, awkward sex that was very uncomfortable, poorly done, and just shoved right on in there. And I hated it, and it was a drag on the book. So if I'm going to rant about Endymion, I'm at least going to put in a little disclaimer in here where I feel like I should mention that there's a lot of very awkward sex in this book. Like, extremely awkward. It feels strange. It feels unnatural. It feels not worded in a sexy, sensual way. It is worded in a very dry, almost matter-of-fact way, which doesn't... It's just very, very strange the way it feels to read because of its presentation. Also, because of the book that it's placed within. But so if that's a problem for you, it's here, and boy is it awkward. But when you have an absurd book with absurd sex, it almost feels like, okay, it doesn't feel out of place, I guess is what I'm saying, like it did in that one right down there. Anyway, could it have done without it? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It didn't really add much for me, but I just felt, I ripped that other book so much for it. I just felt obligated to at least mention it. And for you people, if you don't like really, really almost on the level of uncomfortable sex scenes, yeah, you might want to avoid this one. Anyway, so general wrap up here, because I've talked for way too long. This book was amazing. It's just a 9. If I had to score this book, which I do because it's a review and I would score everything, it's going to come in at a 9. There was never a time where I thought that it was ever going to be less than an 8. I knew probably about halfway through the book that it was just probably not going to be a solid 10, but boy, it was going to come close. And I would say 8, 9, or 10. I'm giving it a 9. I really am. I'm that happy with it. I literally started Kafka on the Shore like the day after I finished this because it was so good that it moved Kafka on the Shore from like, eventually I want to read that at some point this year to, no, I'm reading this one next. It's an absolute 9 out of 10 on the scale of great books, but slight disclaimer there, it just might not be for everybody because it might not be your particular style of book. But for me, God, 9.